Technology is not an island, especially when you're thinking about these businesses that are partially human-centric services businesses and partially technology businesses. It's really easy for there to be drift in between those two worlds. How we adapt the way that we build products to make use of these models is the most challenging part. We need to build in harmony between those two sides of the world. Companies need to be a combination of technology and people.
Welcome everyone on this new episode of Let's Talk AI. Super happy to be here today with Adam Haney. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's so great to catch up with you.
Likewise. Okay, so you are a serial entrepreneur, founder. You were the CTO at Invisible, whom just raised 100 million. We can comment on that. You're currently head of technology at Infinity, which is the AI holdco with multiple AI vertical startups. We can talk more about that. And you're doing way too many things for me to name them here, including being the host of a podcast. But like, if you were to introduce yourself at a conference in like 2 to 3 lines, what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say I'm a builder of, early stage to growth stage companies. My career has been as a CTO, and I've gone through that journey of that kind of hyper scale up, co-founded multiple companies. So started from, and have done the 0 to 1 motion, which I really enjoy. And then also, with Invisible, which obviously has been hugely successful. I joined as the first engineering leader there, scaled the team. We went from $7 million in revenue to $134 million in revenue during my tenure there. Also scaled the team itself from 10 people to about 150 engineers, solutions engineers, analysts. Definitely the journey of building companies, both when they start to show traction and how do you put engineering systems in place, I think is the sweet spot for me, as well as I really enjoyed the 0 to 1 motion as well. And I've found myself throughout my career continuing to come back to that sort of formative early stage of company creation. That's what I do at Infinity now, is I work across the portfolio with all of the technology leads that are building the companies in our AI services holding company.
All right. How's that for an introduction? that sets the tone. I'm a big fan of yours. So, of course, I have many questions throughout this episode, but I want to get right into some interesting stuff. You mentioned some numbers, and what I like particularly is that the 0 to 1 phase is very different from like scanning, but you have reps with both. And right now, the technology is very special. I feel that the way to build products have fundamentally changed in a way that we can trial and error super fast. So as a technology leader and with all these reps, I would be curious to hear, how do you see, with all these conversations with the founders and your experience, how do you see this shift happening? That's one. And second, like, what is your intuition on like the 0 to 1 versus the stage that comes after that, which also have like multiple layers? So like, those are like the two directions I'd love to get started on.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll talk about 0 to 1 first, and then we can talk a little bit about how AI is changing what the scale up motion kind of looks like.
Awesome.
I think, as a bit of a spoiler, like, the idea that in the past you would go out and recruit these massive teams and sort of throw growth capital into them. I think that's changing because AI is changing the way that we're building. But on the 0 to 1 motion, I think that the tools are changing, but the fundamentals are staying pretty similar. What I would say to people in the early 2010s is, how quickly can we build a prototype? Can we do something in Sketch or Figma in order to be able to get this in front of actual customers? And the metric there was like always, are you talking to actual people that want to give you their credit cards in order to buy this solution that you're building? I think that the cycle time for building was longer. And so the kinds of prototype tools that we would use, you were still trying to say, how quickly can I learn from what customers actually want to buy from me and what their actual problems are? And so the tactics then would be build clickable prototypes or build things on paper or get things in front of folks. Now, I think with Lovable and Replit and all of the different AI tools, you can build actual working prototypes that you build with customers. But still, the motion is this actually solving the problem? Do I deeply understand what people need me to build? And how quickly can I iterate? Velocity of both learning and building is the key advantage, and it has always been the key advantage for any startup. You're competing with Google or Facebook or these massive companies that have a huge amount of capital. Your only advantage is that you can move faster than them. if they have an idea, they're aircraft carriers, they can bring a lot of artillery to a particular place, but it's harder for them to go discover where they should point that artillery. As a startup, you just have to be moving more quickly. And I think that the tools are set up to enable people to do that better now. Now, on the scale up journey, a lot of times then, once you've gone from 0 to 1 and now you're at your 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 part of your journey, I think in the past, it was a lot about how are we going to build deep organizational systems? What are my OKRs? Are people aligned around my broader strategy? And then it became really people leadership problem, which I think that there are great techniques for how do we set our vision? How do we say that these are our goals? In the 2010s, you saw these massive scale ups that would happen from engineering leaders. And I remember engineering leaders being judged on what's the size of the organization that you've built, and talk to me about what's your approach to recruiting. Because implicit in that was every dollar that I put into an engineer, I'm going to be able to, take my R&D dollars and improve my margin, improve my defensibility, and thus be able to go build a great company. There were a lot of people that burned a lot of cash at that point in time. And I also think that being a people leader of a 100+ person organization is a very different job than being the CTO of a 5 or 10 person company. I think now the velocity that you can get out of any one individual is going up with AI tools, as well as, the richness of like the frameworks and sort of higher level ways that we approach building applications. It just means that you can do a lot more with significantly fewer people. And I know you've chatted with people even on this podcast that have been able to build things for tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of users with teams of 2 and 3 people, which I think is the new trend. And so what that means is I don't know if the massive armies of developers are going to be as necessary anymore. And because of that, I think that we're going to see a shift from people that are, corner office, high-level boardroom executives that are able to think entirely about budgets, and more in a direction of hands-on builders being able to build companies that have more and more scope, more and more users, and are larger and larger in terms of their impact without having to have the same size of huge engineering team that we needed in decades past.
I love that. That was a very complete answer. Often, when we read these books, 0 to 1, one that I really enjoy over and over regarding like sales and building a product and like aligning the sales vision to like get the proper feedback and iterate on the product, sell more faster. It's a Techstars book. I think that the author is Amos Schwartzfarb, and I'm pretty sure I said it correctly. And in that book, there is like a 3W framework: the who, the what, and the why. Who, your ICP. The why is like, what are the problems? What do they need? And the why is like, what is needed? Why would they pay for it, etc. So you mentioned 0 to 1 and then growing. And I feel that there are always frameworks for those stages, but in the end, it's a lot of systems, operations, communications, alignments, direction, hiring the right people, having the right strategy. And I would say that maybe one of the hardest part of this is like that the more the vision is different for every person in the company, the harder it might get to like have synergy and move. But the more unified the vision becomes, the more velocity the vehicle can acquire, be it for like a small team or a bigger team. Of course, with a bigger team, there are different challenges as a smaller team. But I feel that something very interesting on your background is that you have had experiences with both of the situations many times, meaning like the strategy and many people, or like something very small that is like from 0 to 1. So speaking of frameworks or like those problems, I feel that it's on the ground when you build it, when you do it, when you have the founder hat, when you don't even have like a go-to-market plan because you don't even know what go-to-market looks like. How do you approach? Do you have any frameworks? Do you have any experiences that you can share with us? Maybe one example for both and like your vision of solving these kind of problems, reps that are hard to acquire by listening someone and that are more practical, but that I'm sure we can learn from hearing you talking about it.
Sure. I'll throw a couple things out and then do me a favor and ask me some follow-ups if it doesn't hit everything from your question. So my co-founder at Bellhop's, Cameron Duty, who runs Brickyard, which is a venture capital fund now, is fond of saying that the best companies look like cults for as long as possible. Now, I'm not sure that I fully agree, but the idea behind that, I think, is there's a unified vision of what the world should look like. The world is a way right now, and we want the world to be a different way. And the more that everyone in the team can recite that, and I don't think that, we should all wear cloaks or do ritual sacrifices in the middle of the office or anything like that. But I think it's important, to your point, that there is a unified vision. Everyone within the company should be marching in the same direction. And so if they're not, that's the first problem that you need to figure out how are you solving. Now, if there's dissent and people disagree about the direction, we need to work through that. If there's miscommunication or there's lack of an adequate framing from the leader about what it is that we're building, you definitely need to work through that as well. That's one of the largest problems when organizations get bigger, is that the number of steps in between the person that's saying this is the direction that we should go and the people that are actually implementing it, the more jumps that makes, the more translation that has to go through, the higher the probability that something goes awry or that people are rowing in opposite directions. You create a lot of heat and no light. And so because of that, it's really important that that direction is set well. And as organizations get larger, that becomes the entire job of that leader, is effectively, what's my communication strategy for how I'm going to set this vision so that everybody at all levels understands it. That's why I think frameworks are useful. To me, the creation of a framework allows people to understand, like, what's the language that I'm going to use to describe something. So I really like the playing to win framework because it also does a job of telling a story. So playing to win, there are 5 different parts of it. What is our winning aspiration? Which again is this like big high level vision that needs to be set by the leader. Where will we play? Which is effectively a question about like what market do we want to be in? How will we win? Which is basically, what are the tactics that we are going to use in order to move forward? And then from there, the final 2 questions become much more tactical. So what capabilities must be in place? If we're going to go and win using, this strategy, what does that mean about us? Who needs to be on the team? And then finally, what management systems are required? And so that gets into your like OKRs and KPIs and all of the different sort of ways that you're tracking your progress towards winning something. I think that kind of framing is helpful, but what you're really looking for is the answer to those questions. Something like playing to win doesn't tell you what your strategy should be. It just helps you to prompt a conversation from a leader to a team about, what is that direction. And so I think that sort of thing is helpful. It's probably a bigger company thing. I mean, for a 0 to 1 team, they might be useful as a set of questions in order to make sure that you've thought through the entire problem statement. But ultimately, you need to be talking to customers to answer the question about what is our winning aspiration and where will we play. And so all of this is iterative. I don't think that any of those things need to be answers that you carve into the wall and never change.
Yeah. And I love that last point. I think that this is extremely useful, and I think that each situation might require different frameworks, and that this is also like, from my perspective, it's also patience, communication, and sometimes the answers aren't clear right away, but like just keeping throwing at the question and trying to ask yourself the right questions seems to be the only way forward, because maybe it will take some time before some alignment and cohesive vision, but the fact that we're working to figure the vision out helps you get sooner to like the common understanding.
Putting these things in writing is extremely valuable. So whether that means I, as a CEO or a CTO, I'm going to send out a weekly email. At the top of any of my updates, I always want to start with, hey, as a reminder, this is the North Star of where we're going. And now I can tell you what we've done in order to be able to accomplish that. But I want to continuously come back to the framing of, this is what's important, and this is what I'm doing in order to get me from where I am today to where I'm trying to go. I've heard people say before, as a leader, when people start telling you that you're repeating yourself, they're starting to get it. And so I think that you just have to repeat yourself so many times in order to make sure that message is getting through, and that it's really important that, you think you've said it once and people understand it. You actually probably need to say it 100 times before they're annoyed with you, and you start, when it becomes a meme internally, it's starting to break through.
The meme is a bar. I love that. And I think it's an underlying rule in marketing, which is like when you start getting bored about your marketing is when you're actually getting started, because like no one know you. You just need to repeat and repeat and repeat what you're doing. I think that it's a great comparison that works for both. Communication, having the right frameworks, putting things into words, iterating on the vision. I would like to ask you about engineers or builders and surrounding yourself with the right people to build on that vision. You, of course, have a lot of experience building teams that goes on a mission. How do you go about that process? Meaning, how do you make sure that the right people, the right fit with the culture, the right velocity, and maybe you can also add a note about like how it was some time ago and like more recently due to like all the possibilities of cloud code, codecs, and LLMs. There is so much more possibilities in building fast, but yet there is also different approaches. What are your thoughts overall on like hiring and engineering, but also you can share like higher level?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's dependent on stage a little bit. So I'll talk a little bit once again about your sort of 0 to 1, the first 10 people on your team, and then as you get larger, you're going to be people at sort of different levels in the organization. I think that they need to have different kinds of profiles and different character traits, different tendencies. In your first 10 hires, it's very hard to predict exactly what it is that you want somebody to be able to build. Unless you're building something that's extremely specific, you want generalists and you want people that are excited to be generalists. So I look for people with an inherent curiosity. It seems so foundational, but when I ask people, tell me about yourself, I'm looking for not just I accomplished this set of things, here are all of the KPIs that I hit, but like, why did you do that? Obviously, I don't want to get into too much of the details of their personal life, but as much as they're willing, why did you become an engineer? There are a lot of things that people could go do. Why are you not a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher? Why did you get into this kind of thing? You're looking for somebody that did this because they couldn't help it. You're looking for somebody that's curious, that enjoys the practice of going and learning, gets that rush of dopamine whenever they've learned a new thing, and they are now capable of doing magic with a computer, for lack of a better term. I think that it's really important in the early days that you surround yourself with people that when there is a new challenge that's put in front of them, they're going to enjoy it and it's going to be fun for them. Because now all of a sudden, you don't have to go figure out how to motivate them. You're effectively just telling them, here is the map of the territory that we need to go conquer. And they are excited to be on that mission. So I think that that is a foundational thing. The shadow side of that, like the counter, is that people that are really curious sometimes will go dig rabbit holes in places that are not super useful. And so you have to counterbalance that with, do you understand enough about what it is that we're trying to build together and why that's important? That's one of the things Francis Pedraza, the founder of Invisible, was incredibly good at. He believed that everybody on the team, if they were an engineer or a salesperson or in any role whatsoever, that they needed to be financially literate. And that was actually part of the interview process was, we would give them a example balance sheet and cash flow statement and P&L and ask them questions about it. That was a very unique thing to say, you need to be an engineer that is creative and enjoys technology, but you also need to be able to be literate in what's going on within the business. And I think if you can find that counterbalance of people that are curious, excited to learn, excited to go solve new problems, and also can ground that in the reality of what's going on in the business, man, like you are off to such a great start at that point. Other things culturally, I mean, the idea that somebody is going to jump in to any problem and own it is really important. Like you don't want passive people. And that's, again, part of that idea that we're all on a mission together and we view this as a common success for all of us. I think that it's really important that you have people that are willing to go be owners and, completely own a problem and not just say, I did my piece of this. Lastly, no assholes is always important. Like it's important that if you are building this team of people that are curious, that are bought into the mission, that we're all trying to pull in the same direction, that you can build a level of collegiality amongst one another in order to make sure that doesn't mean no accountability, but it just means when we mess up, we need to be able to assume that all of us are trying to row in the same direction and we need to be able to learn and get better from it in a way that still encourages people to take risks and encourages people to try new things.
Love that. My next question is going to be fun, at least for me. I'd love to hear like all the different ventures and things that you've built and maybe like a brief description of it, all of your favorite moments, right? So it'd be like you've built multiple teams. So like that was the context and this is my favorite takeaway from this experience or something. But I just want to ask you on the asshole thing because I think that having maybe more concrete examples is useful. From everything that you said, what I love about the process of hiring is that there is a broader mission and there is a reality that frames that mission and that creates variables that needs to be played by because they are the rule of the game. And so the more people can understand the real rules and like the tools that they have to operate and like how to gain more trust and more leverage to be able to have more impact, the better the setup, which refers to your financial literacy, but I think that someone that has a very curious mindset is like, what are you listening? Which podcasts? How hungry are you? Are you going to be looking at a Trello or at a Jira and like you want to fill tickets? Or like, are you in open source projects? Are you listening to the state of the art of papers or people who are building the latest technology? You wake up excited by these things. It looks like a game to you and not like work, like all these kind of things I think that are rewarding. And I think that those also generally apply to all the different roles. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like a game because this is what I want to do and I want to be great at it. And I'm accountable for the work that I do. And I want to remove the problem of others. And I want to contribute as much as possible to like the impact and the overall mission. Those are guidelines. And so maybe if you can share a few more red flags or like what not to do and maybe like specific examples, I think can be interesting.
In terms of like, red flags for people, I can tell you, specific interviewing techniques potentially. So the anti-pattern for me when I talk to somebody, especially if they're coming from a prestigious institution, whether that's academic or industrial, is they're sort of, hey, look at everything that happened around me in this organization. I think you really have to look out for what did you actually do? So is this somebody that is just riding the coattails of everyone around them? Or is this somebody that's able to say, I was impactful in this way. This was what my contribution was. I think that that's one thing I would definitely look out for is people that have been able to build their careers on the rooms that they were in, not the things that they did in those rooms. Greatest strengths are often greatest weaknesses. So if you have somebody else that everything in the conversation is about them, then, okay, how did you collaborate with the rest of the team? Is this somebody that is going to be able to work with others? One of the techniques is just literally in the conversation with them, what is the ratio of I to we that they use? If everything is we, you have a high probability, or at least you need to ask a follow-up question, which is, what was your contribution to this team? If everything is I, it's appropriate to then say, okay, how did you work with other people? The other one I think is harder to test for in interviews because during interviews, people are generally on their best behavior. The way that people interact with the rest of their team is really important. Reference checks, and not just reference checks from the people that somebody gives you, but also reference checks around, let me go find somebody else in the organization and see if I can understand what this person was like to work with. Effectively, what is their reputation, I think is important. Now, that's harder in somebody's earlier career, but I think especially when you think about placing leaders, it's really important, not just what somebody's skills are, but how they're going to behave in a group.
Awesome. Okay, let's jump into DevOps, Brickyard, Invisible. So can you maybe share like a piece of each of your favorite highlights? One core takeaway that you took home from that experiences. When you have so many experiences, I feel that it can be interesting to map out a few takeaways on that timeline that maybe have synergies or like can show core lessons learned through experience that we can share.
Sure. So I'll try to map out a context a little bit. So I studied computer science, did research at Oak Ridge National Laboratory very early in my career, and that was sort of where the foundation of data processing and data engineering work that I later used in my career kind of came from. My very first experience was a company called Reticker that was later rebranded to Fireplug. We built a news aggregator app that ingested millions of news articles a day and then observed people's reading habits and the contents of the news articles that they were reading in order to suggest new news articles to them, which was just such a fun project to work on as a 22, 23-year-old. I was the CTO of that company, and it was a very small team. My takeaway there was we built some really cool algorithms, some really cool machine learning projects. Ultimately, that business didn't work out because we didn't own the content. The takeaway at that point was that it's not adequate to just be able to build something that from an engineering perspective is really great. It's important that you understand, okay, how is this company actually making money? And that includes my marketing channels, how am I acquiring users, what are those users doing whenever they come onto my application? What's my retention look like? Like all of the sort of user analytics pieces are what I learned there, because ultimately the product can be fantastic. And if nobody uses it, or if lots of people use it, but you can't come up with a way to monetize that, which is really challenging in that specific case because we didn't own the content, we were suggesting other people's content to you, then it doesn't really matter. how well built the application is. And so I think that was the first time that I started to realize that if you want to be a leader in technology, you have to be literate in the business context that you're living in. From there, I went to Bellhops. So I was the CTO of that company as well. When I joined, they did not have a technology team at all. And so my role was first to take this business that was very service oriented when I initially joined and come up with the technology in order to help them grow and scale. For context, Bellhops is a moving company. They work in a similar way as Uber. So they were a 1099 or contractor model, gig economy company for household labor and moving. During my time there, when I initially joined, I think they had done several thousand moves. By the time that I left, they'd done 200,000. And so there was a scaling problem of how do we go out and find the individual bellhops, which were the contractors that were doing the labor. How do we go find them? I actually ran the growth team at Bellhops for a little while to go source bellhops as well as go find customers. And so in addition to that, I scaled the engineering team from just me to about 35. I was also on the deal team for their Series A and Series B and helped them to raise about $30 million during my time there. And so takeaways, man, there are so many from that one. I think especially when you're working in services businesses, which is a lot of where my career has been, it's important to really foster a strong relationship in between the operations team and the technology team. So I think sometimes as technologists, we think that we need to build a pretty polished thing, like we need to build something that's consumer grade in order to solve a problem. I was amazed at when we were really close with the operations team, the things that we could build that made the business materially better without having to be super polished. I think it's more important that you are tightly in the trenches with that operations team as a technologist. I would send engineers out to go on moves. So every engineer was out doing a move every 6 months. I would send engineers to go work in our call center with our operations team. I think what was important as a part of that is just technology is not an island, especially when you're thinking about these businesses that are partially human-centric services businesses and partially technology businesses. It's really easy for there to be drift in between those two worlds. And I think that the best AI services businesses or service businesses in general that are technology enabled, those two worlds need to be really tightly coupled. And so I fostered a really strong relationship with the COO of that company. I think from the top down, it was important. Him and I trusted each other, and thus our teams trusted each other, and thus those teams were able to work together. And I think that that was massively important. From there, I actually went back into bootstrap mode. So I worked on actually with the COO of Bellhops, him and I co-founded a business together called The House. And The House was a location-aware happy hour and events application. So our tagline was, "What's going on?" So basically, you could open this up and around you see all of the restaurants that had happy hours, all of the music venues that had live events, all of the block parties, basically anything that was going on in a city. I built that as a hands-on engineer once again. So basically, after having gone through the motion of kind of scaling up, being a people leader, helping with fundraising and all of the important aspects of scaling a business, it was really interesting to kind of go back to just hands-on keyboard, just building something. With that business, I did everything. We didn't have graphic design, so I decided I was going to build out the brand book and all of the style guidelines for everything. I had to learn how to be a mobile engineer, had to learn how to be a DevOps engineer, I had to learn how to do every single piece of the process. With that, I think that made me really well-rounded. And I think that's definitely something that if you have an opportunity in your career to do all aspects of engineering creation, it's incredible in terms of now I feel like I am much more broad in my understanding. At that point, I had mostly done startups and had mostly done the either 0 to 1 or 1 to 10 journey. I went to Meta after that and decided that I wanted to see like what was it like to work in big tech. And so while I was there were almost 100,000 engineers that were working at Meta, and they had built incredible systems for managing engineering, throughput, managing security, managing all of the things that are pretty tactical in smaller stages. They have systematized in every way. And so it was amazing to see how do you think about leading a large organization? How do you set strategy? How do you set direction? Ultimately, I decided that I really enjoyed being much more at the seed stage myself. And so came back and joined Invisible as the VP of engineering initially. And that was where I sort of did the engineering scale up. And then in my final year and a half there, was the acting CTO. At Invisible, I mean, I think that once again, I'd done scale up at Bellhops, but this was scaling up, I think, probably 10 times faster. Once again, understanding that the importance of cultural alignment was huge. My biggest takeaway, I really do think Francis's insistence on people's financial literacy. Invisible shared all of the details about their finances with the entire team. I think that I learned a lot about how do you align an engineering strategy with a business strategy at Invisible? How do you do the storytelling down to engineers about, Invisible is a very complicated business. They do a lot of things for a lot of people. And so I think it was important to build that muscle of how do you make sure that engineers that are working on disparate things for multiple different clients understand how their work contributes back to the top line growth. And Invisible was growing extremely quickly. And so there was a lot of recruiting and work that needed to happen there.
And speaking of which, they just raised 100 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they announced that a couple of days ago. I mean, definitely, it was a journey at Invisible as we sort of scaled revenue in a massive way and scaled the team. But super excited for them, especially, Infinity is an offshoot of Invisible. We were originally internal to the Invisible organization. We've since spun out, but our mission and thesis around AI services remains the same as what I think led to the success of Invisible. Infinity is now doing that work in other sectors and other industries.
Man, that is quite some learnings. A few things that I enjoyed a lot are that continuously growing, building, learning. You make it look and sound easy, but behind each of those steps, there is like a continuous search for what is the right action to take, what is the next step, what is the learning that I need to find so that I can achieve the next level. And also being hands-on and leading across the board have been very interesting to learn from. So maybe the simple transitions that I want to make is like regarding what you're doing today. I'm having so much fun being at the edge of everything coming out every week, every day, every month, be it paper, podcasts, technology. What are you most exciting about what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think LLMs and the broader AI innovation that we're seeing is really exciting and really capable. That translation layer in between how we take these models and make them actually valuable has proven really difficult. I know there have been multiple studies that have shown that somewhere between 5 and 10% of enterprise AI projects actually deliver value. That means in the best case, 90% of them don't. How we adapt the way that we build products to make use of these models is the most challenging part. And my thesis is that services is the way that we do that. So service-driven businesses, historically, VCs really shied away from them because there was not a way to create margin from them. The idea that you would have a professional services organization attached to a software company, well, I want SaaS margins, I don't want services margins, I think was something that people said for 20 or 30 years. And so now the agents and LLMs that we're building are capable of delivering a lot of that service. And so it's really change the underlying business fundamentals, which opens up a huge opportunity for us as technologists to then go grab all of this territory that previously was kind of off limits to us or was too complicated or challenging for us to be able to go build solutions that help people. I'm excited, and that's the thesis of Infinity, which is that services are now an option for hyperscale companies, and that we need to, not just go build software on an island the same way that I was talking before about technology and operations teams not being separate, but instead that we need to build in harmony between those two sides of the world. So we believe that, companies need to be a combination of technology and people, and that by including humans in the loop as a part of that service delivery, we can harness the best of both worlds. So humans in order to make complex creative decisions, and AI models to do repetitive tasks that, really we don't want humans to have to do the same thing over and over again. We want humans to be able to live at the edge of, what their creativity is capable of achieving.
Love that. I'm going to share my screen because I want your thoughts on this because you have a lot of experience building things. And right now you're talking to a lot of founders. There is a recent thread that I think you might be seeing right now of Sarah Guo. And so basically on that thread, she's like a lot of red flags or things to be careful about when you're building. So for example, early warnings, let's say the God objects in one code, one class that knows everything, shows up as a founder who must approve everything. Early on this product taste, etc., premature optimization in code. And so this is an amazing thread, not to go over it, but you having so many conversations, what are like signals that you think founders needs to be thinking about and like review their strategy or their communication? And what are signals where you're like, something's happening here, especially at the age of like services and products, which are kind of merging and becoming one. So like productivizing services I've never had such potential as of today with the latest improvements and technologies. So any intuition on both? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of traction for services businesses and when they're succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of the classic product market fit signals are still true, which is if you took the service away from somebody, would they pay you massively more for it? Would it be a huge problem for them if you stopped delivering this service, as opposed to, is it just a nice to have, which is sort of the classic like painkillers versus vitamins? Are we doing something that's actually creating value, or is it just sort of nice at the margin? And so I think that it's challenging for me to like really distill that. You could look at things like churn and retention in order to understand, are people continuing to use the service, as well as usage overall? Like, are we seeing that over time, the usage of the service in an organization that we start delivering the service to, are they using more and more of it, or are they using less and less? So, I mean, I think that those are kinds of some of the smells that are really just business fundamentals overall. For the AI service thesis to work, one of the ones that might be unique is, how is headcount scaling with revenue? So core to the thesis is the idea we're going to have people that are doing the most important things, and then the models are going to help come provide efficiencies for how we deliver this service. The failure mode is, I have people that are doing a lot of things and the technology is not actually providing that benefit. And so starting with the services motion allows you to deeply understand the customer. If you continue on an entirely manual services motion, you haven't actually built an AI services business, you've just built a services business. So I think that that's something that it's really important to, in all of the updates from a company that's building in a services motion, to keep an eye on, are the financials actually bearing out the mission that you are starting? And so I've seen some companies, Uber was famous, for instance, for they always wanted 50% of their staff to be engineering, and they wanted 50% of the spend to be engineering. So it would have been really easy for Uber to build a huge operations organization for technology to not solve the problem. I think in those cases, what you actually want to do is, if you need more people that are delivering a manual or repetitive service, put engineers in those seats. And I think that that's why the notion of forward deployed engineering that Palantir created and brought into the conversation, the reason that that's so important is, like, if you have an engineer do something manual and they're the kind of curious person that we were talking about earlier, they will not continue to do that thing manually forever. They will have virtuous laziness where they realize that, hey, I can automate some part of this process. And I think that you want to continue to do that. Otherwise, if the headcount of the organization scales with revenue, you're not really going to find the efficiencies that you need. And then you're also going to have a lot of those communication problems that we talked about earlier.
I love that. I just recorded an episode with Kevin Smith. We shared a few things related to that. The first one, which I loved, is the 5 people rule for UX. So it's like, you don't need like 10,000 of people going through your UX and your A/B testing, and you're like, which button are they going to click? And look, this is not statistically significant, so we need to. So like 5 people, throw them into your new UX, and you'll see the product, and it will be extremely clear. I love that takeaway. And another one, there are just 4 people, and because there are just 4, they just have to be building in a way that they can just iterate on. And so looking at all the Snip features, so if you don't know about Snip, it's AI-powered podcasts, very famous, and I really recommend you to try it out, because if you're a continuous learner, you'll have fun. I'm not sponsored, but definitely a very interesting product leveraging the latest technology to deliver something that was unique. And on other things that you mentioned, developing that intuition for the customer and like what they need. I think has like such defensiveness and moat, because the more you know about your ICP and like all the little details and processes and things that can go wrong, the more you have operation reps and like an understanding of how they're operating, their current challenge, and like the more you can speak into their words, the easier it becomes to define what do we need to build with intuition and data. And to that point, intuition and data, I think that sometimes we overthink about data points, but when you know so well and you had so many conversations with like clients, the data will do two things: either reinforce an idea that you already have, or like show you that you were wrong on something, or that like there is something that you still need to learn. Beside that, I'm really bullish in intuition, especially at early stages, because the velocity at which things are changing is so much higher that we literally just need, as Kevin said, it's just talk to the users, ship something so that people start using it. Once you are seeing positive feedbacks, only once that you can like build a more robust version, or like you can do a more official launch, etc., etc. It feels like this intuition part is such a big thing. Any thoughts on all those notes?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You need to be talking to customers, and I think even once you have an application or a service that those customers are using, you want to wrap analytics around it so that you can understand, the metrics of what that usage kind of looks like, but you still want to talk to them. Those metrics help you, unless you're building a consumer application where you do have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, when I was at Meta, we would do experiments with 1 basis point of traffic and get to statistical significance in a couple of hours. And so that's sort of an outlier. That's not a problem that 0 to 1 companies have. If they build following those kinds of practices, they're not going to build an intuition. They're just going to sort of, based on the metrics, I should go in this direction, but I don't have any soul as it relates to what it is that my customer is actually trying to achieve. Now, as with all things, the counter argument to that is, if you are just basing it on your own intuition, oh, I've talked to 100 customers, I know exactly what it is that they want, you're in dangerous territory where your intuition might not match what's actually happening. So those two things need to reinforce one another. I have an intuition and I'm doing a thing, and now do the metrics bear out that I was right? Or the metrics are showing me some pattern, and now I'm going to go talk to a representative customer about, are they experiencing any issue? What's going on that's leading to this behavior that I'm observing in my metrics? And so I think you need both throughout that process. Services position you to be able to do that incredibly well, because it's not abnormal for somebody that's providing a service to reach out, hey, maybe I'm using some agents as a part of my service delivery, but the expectation is still that there's, a human that's a part of this process. And so that allows your team to build that intuition. It's just important that also the software engineers, designers, product people within that organization are also building that intuition, so you don't even have drift internally in between your operational and technical team. Those teams need to be combined as well.
I think that, yeah, intuition, data, but like the feedback loop. I think that the takeaway that I'm hearing from this is that it's not like speaking to customers once. It's like obsessively having conversations about like, hey, we built that. What do you think? How does that help you? And I think that being obsessed with like the value it generates, and why are you building that in the first place? What is the problem? And the funny thing about all these theory and concepts that we read in all the books when you've done your homework is that it's very repetitive. As Alex Hormozy likes to say, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. In practice, what great looks like is crazy, because when you see a very talented entrepreneur, like for example, if we look at you in like any of the experiences that you mentioned, I'm sure that you've had levels or aha moments of like what great looks like. You meet someone or you see someone operating at another level, and they're following the same rules, same principles with the same words. But like the image that I have in my head about what great looks like, all of a sudden becomes smashed by the level of the person who I'm looking at. It's like, oh, so this is why you're so successful and you have such this win. It's because like the bar is at another level. We're applying the same concept, the same principle, but the way to applying it, the way to understanding it is like different, which is why like we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, because we're continuously relearning all the core concepts of business over and over and over and over again with like deeper understanding of them from experience. Do you want to share anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think A lot of times people want to know what is the silver bullet or like what is the moat to
The
create
hack,
a bit.
yeah.
Yeah, what's the hack that is going to make this easier? And I think especially now that we can create software so much more quickly, the hack is move faster. The hack is discipline and diligence to make sure that we are talking to customers, we're building with speed, we're building high quality products that we're excited for customers to use. We've democratized the ability to do a lot of those activities. What that means is that an advantage that used to give you a 3 or 4 year head start where somebody would go out and they'd make a deep investment in software and they would have some capability. A lot of people can catch up a lot more quickly, which means it's going to be more and more important that as you build teams, they have a culture of shipping, they have a culture of talking to customers. More than that, they're bound together by a culture of a shared mission and ownership in order to go build incredible things.
I also feel that the more experience you have, the more exigent you become through that experience. And so you're surrounded by better people. Do you feel that throughout your experiences, your bar have raised continuously and today your expectations are way higher because you have a better understanding of what great looks like and you know how to approach many situations from many angles? And because of your understanding of reality throughout all these repetitions and real experiences gave you so much learning, that there is no other way for you to not being exigent, which doesn't mean like coming back to your point of assholes. I'm not speaking about like being an asshole in that case. I'm just speaking about what great looks like and the kind of culture that you want to develop. For example, you mentioned Francis expecting financial literacy, which is like, I know what I want and this is the bar. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. If the team that you surround yourself with, more importantly, as a leader, the team that you hire, if they're not holding each other accountable, if they don't want to do great things, then they won't. I talked a lot about curiosity and ownership, but ultimately there's an aspirational component. Do we believe that there's something about the world that we're going to change in order to make it better? We're going to create something that doesn't exist. There's an alchemy in that process, right? Like we have decided that there's something about the world that we want to make better, whether that's business or anything. Surrounding yourself first with people that deeply care and then with people that you can learn from is massively important. And it's really the only way to get better as a person. I mean, you can go read and you can practice, and I think that it's important for you to have your own diligence, but also your expectations for yourself are going to be kind of subconsciously set by how do other people around me act. If my team is communicating well, they're all learning, they're sharing their learnings, they're getting better, they're holding themselves to a high level of expectation, then when I think about, should I knock off at 5 or should I continue working on this thing? Am I excited about it? Am I surrounded by people that are also excited about building? I think that there's just a lot of subconscious things that happen when you surround yourself with brilliant and ambitious people. I think that if you are not that, you're doing yourself a disservice in terms of how you're spending your own time.
Yeah, I love that. I feel that how the level of drive of people in these kind of teams really shape that average, as you mentioned. It's like you either have it or you don't have, meaning like the team has it or not. But like if the team doesn't have it, then it's a lot of follow up and a lot of actions and efforts to set up something that might not be here. But when the team has it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is what great looks like. So like the problems doesn't even exist because people are driven and they care about what they're doing and they have high standards and they're not driven only about the mission of the company. What I've had fun before in conversations in the podcast or like outside is like when I talk to very interesting people, they love what they do and they are driven both personally and professionally. And so I feel that there is a balance between how do you take decisions in your personal life that can really reflect the way you have fun in your work. I don't know to which extent I would +1 myself on this one, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think people that are driven or ambitious or that decide to make things happen, they may not have always done that in their working life. It's a reason, a lot of times, especially in sales positions, you see people that go out and build sales teams that are made up of former college athletes. There should be somewhere in your life that you see that this person decided to do something that was hard, they decided to, and they made it happen. I don't know that that's a one size fits all. There are people that grew up in challenging circumstances and overcame those, and I have a lot of admiration for those kinds of people. There are people that have done everything from deciding to do something athletically. There are engineers that I've met that decided, I'm going to take my Nintendo 64 apart and figure out how every single part of it works and modify it in some way. And so like you should look for, when you're building that team, a spikiness in some way about something where somebody took something that required either a high amount of effort or a high amount of dedication and they accomplished it. Build a team of those kinds of people. And then you make the mission of what we are doing as a group together clear. You reinforce it through continuous communication about that mission, as well as you break that mission down into smaller and smaller pieces. Each week, this is what we're going to do. Did we accomplish the thing that we set out to do this week? Okay, no, why not? Let's go and let's build that loop of how we're going to make sure that we're moving forward. If you have the underlying foundation of motivated, brilliant people, then you make the mission incredibly clear. It's, I think that you are bound for success. Unless you're pointed at the wrong thing. That's the responsibility of the leader in order to make sure that we are seeing reality about the direction that we are going.
And this is so exciting to be in environments like that. And I really like the way you framed it. I think that the underlying pattern is that everyone has such a unique story, but like building out that story for yourself, setting your expectations for yourself continuously higher, and like discipline and consistency. And you mentioned earlier in the episode, building a reputation for yourself. I think that this compounds literally. If I have the mission and I have the drive and I compound the action, I develop this resilience, then it's very impressive. And so having a team of people who have very unique stories, but who have that common trait, underlying hunger, but as to your point, it can be very different and different backgrounds, but that underlying skill or character is crucial. It's like that super high curiosity and discipline. Awesome. So just to wrap up, we've talked about many things. Any call to action and any last words for this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if what we're talking about in terms of culture or the kinds of technology that we've talked about building is interesting to you, we are building more companies at Infinity. All of our portfolio is hiring, as well as we are creating new AI services businesses every quarter. We have a list of our call to founders on our website. If the culture that I'm talking about is interesting to you, would love to chat with anybody. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name's just Adam Haney. I work at Infinity, which is infinityconstellation.com. I would be thrilled to talk to anybody that wants to build and wants to reshape how services are delivered with AI.
Amazing. Adam, it was awesome to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to the next one. Any last words, any takeaway from this episode?
No, I mean, I think just once again, I appreciate you taking the time. This was a fun conversation. If anybody finds, what we're building interesting, we're always looking for builders.
Amazing. Reach out. All the links will be in the description. Adam, have an amazing day and thanks for being part of Let's Talk AI.